In this Sports Management 101 video, I spoke to Niall Couper, CEO of Fair Game, a group of individuals, academics and clubs on a mission to create a fairer future for football across the board. In the interview, we spoke about the reasons behind Fair Game's creation, what needs to change in football and how to create it. We also looked ahead to some of Fair Game's future plans, including their ideas on making football in Scotland a more level playing field. So without further ado, here is Niall Couper. Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Niall. Really appreciate you taking up, not taking up my time, giving up your time to come and talk to us today. So perhaps first off, I wondered if you could explain a bit of background to what Fair Game is, or perhaps who Fair Game is and what you do as an organisation.
Yeah, so Fair Game is a group of 34 football clubs, professional men's football clubs, one female football club, backed by kind of leading academics across the country. Where we position ourselves is that we believe that there is issues within football, and our football clubs basically identified the problems that they believed that were in the game. And what we then did is, instead of just finger pointing, oh, look, this is broken, we thought, oh, this is broken, how do we fix it? And the big thing about how you fix it is to actually start looking at those people who've really studied it and researched it. And those are the academics in the country. So we really work quite closely with them to develop some realistic long-term solutions to various elements of the problems within the game. And then the key to that was then to take it back to the clubs to see whether this would actually work in practice. So that's the other key element. And that's basically where we've been developing and what we've been looking at throughout all of the kind of research work and the manifestos and the policy papers that we put forward are always based on that particular element. Ultimately, this is about people having those key values of Fair Game at the heart, which are community, integrity and sustainability. So that's really making sure that a football club is there for the long haul, and that it actually is embedded within its area and in its community and is there and is sustainable. So that's kind of where Fair Game came to, which is probably why we're at 34 clubs and not 140 or whatever it is, because not all clubs have that same ethos. So these are the clubs that really believe that football can be a force for good and can actually have an alternative future. And those are the ones that have that hindsight. A lot of other clubs sometimes are a bit nasal gazing, and what we're looking at is those ones that really want to see football change.
Great, thanks so much. That's really helpful. I'd like to perhaps go back to the start in terms of why Fair Game was set up. You've mentioned some of the things there within your first response, but what was the kind of catalyst towards the startup and the introduction of Fair Game?
So that is very much a personal thing. So I'm a Wimbledon fan. So kind of there's a lot of hurt there. And I stood for the board of the Dons Trust back in, well, it would have been October 2019 or whatever. I can't remember what year it was, October 2020. As part of that, my manifesto, it was, what can Wimbledon do to make a difference to the wider football community? So not just thinking about what we do in it as dealing with our fans on the pitch or whatever. It was about, well, we've been through a lot of hurt and pain. How can we help? Or how can we play a role in the wider football world? Now, I used to be a sports journalist for The Independent. Obviously, I'm an avid football fan, and I'm also, work for Amnesty International as the head of media. So that put me in a position where I was able to speak to journalists, ex-footballers, campaigners, all those sort of stuff, and ask, right, what needs to change in football? What's the kind of big problem within the game? And what came back very clearly was governance, how the game's actually run was the key thing. So that was what came back, and that was after I got elected. They gave me that remit, so I went off and went and did all these wonderful things. And within a couple of months, I started speaking to a couple of other clubs and said, look, this is what I've heard. I'd spoken to the Football Sports Association. They said, look, this exists among supporters groups. What it doesn't exist is among football clubs. Football clubs haven't coalesced around this theory of change, this idea that football can be better. Individually, you've had a couple of clubs pick up the phone and moan, but they never come together. And this is about bringing those clubs together. So, began to make those calls, went from one AFC Wimbledon, obviously, being the very first club, to 3, then 5, then 10, and now, as I say, up to 34. So, and that was by those clubs kind of going, right, actually, we can be part of that difference. And what Fair Game was doing is saying, we know your values, your club values. We know that a lot of clubs are time poor, so we are effectively your campaigning arm. We are on that's going to be doing that. We're going to be the ones who are finding the solutions and helping you as a club move forward. And that's where it all came from. But it all began simply from, me as an individual saying, I want Wimbledon to play a bigger role in how football can be a force for good. And what we now have is 34 clubs that are committed to football being a force for good. It's that vision that's taken it forward. And so that's where it all began.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I suppose you mentioned the word vision there. What would you say is ultimately the aim and objective of Fair Game?
I think it is to have a game where every football fan can put on their shirt, proud in everything it stands for, safe in the knowledge that club will be there for the long haul. So those are two big things. It's like you're putting on that shirt and it isn't funded by some organisation that has got the wrong ethics, and you know that the people out on the pitch care about the club, and you know that the club cares about the community. It's embedded in the community, but it's there as a custodian of a long history, and that it will never put the club's future at risk. It won't be part of that gambling culture where when it goes wrong, your club is no longer there. That's what we want Fair Game. That's what Fair Game's calling for, and hoping to get to that state. And at the moment, that culture doesn't exist. There are a number of clubs that believe that, but there are an awful lot of clubs that don't. And the people that lose out are the communities and the fans.
Yeah, earlier on you spoke about the work of academics within Fair Game. I wondered if you could expand upon that in terms of what is the output of Fair Game. What are some of those metrics that you spoke about? How does Fair Game measure things like sustainability and responsibility?
So, it's absolutely vital, the academics, because what it is it gives us kudos within the political environment when you've got a regulator potentially coming in. It's saying, that we are not here just to say it's broken. We're here to say we're here to fix it. And what we found when we began this process was there was an awful lot of academics who've written fantastic books and papers, but they're sitting on shelves going nowhere. And what we wanted to do was take that academic frustration and give it a space to grow and to flourish, and ultimately to deliver change. And that's where we found so much traction, because it's that ability to make it real, and to give a voice to those really hard work solutions. And that's really where we came from. So when we've applied that to things like regulation, for example, is a classic one. So regulation at the moment in football is focused on penalties, as in point penalties, financial penalties. There's nothing about incentives. Yet the most successful regulators in the country reward. So you start rewarding good behaviour. You make it as though actually, if you do well, you're well run, then you get financial benefit. That starts changing the culture. One of the very early quotes I remember hearing from a civil servant in, wasn't it? It was a consultant for the civil service, who said, if you want to deliver culture change, start offering people money and you'll see it overnight.
Right.
That's part of the research, part of the academic stuff that we did to find those sort of conversations. And that is really instrumental towards how everything goes with Fair Game. So, we've looked at what should be the best standards for equality standards. So we've got people researching, what does a female-friendly football club look like? Those metrics go into the Fair Game Index, and obviously that becomes one of the touch points that would be helping clubs get higher and lower ratings. And obviously the higher they score, the more money we believe they should get. And that would then encourage clubs to go, well, actually we should be female friendly. And then the other things that go with good governance. Do we want a transparent board? Do you want to see a better balance of diversity in boards? Do you want to see more financial sustainability, clubs doing something ridiculous, like as in actually spending less than they actually earn on players' wages, which in the Championship is completely, doesn't happen at all. So those sort of things. By incentivizing those behaviours, then you start seeing culture change. And each of those touch points within the Fair Game Index are all rigorously chosen because of academic research. So they're not being, it's not me and you sitting in a pub going, right, let's make these up. It's not. It's like, actually, these are elements of where we're going and what we want to try and achieve. And with Fair Game, that's constant improvement. So have we got it right? No, we haven't. It's not a bad start, but it can certainly be improved, and we will always want to improve. And the way we believe we can do that is by pulling in that academic expertise and skills to make sure the things that football is being judged upon are amongst the best, and that ultimately we also provide that pathway on how to improve. So it's not just saying this is what you've been judged on, but here is the expert that can tell you how do you implement good governance, how do you implement financial sustainability, how do you implement good community engagement, good social impact, and all of those elements that are so vital for the longevity of a football club. Those skill sets and those kind of expertise exist, and it's Fair Game's mantra to bring those all together so that when we engage with football, we've got that kind of solution off the shelf that's previously been sitting dusty there in somebody's academic library and actually become live living document.
In terms of some of those indexes that you've produced to date, is there consistently clubs that have performed well, that good examples and good practice that you could share?
Yeah, so Lincoln City are a great example. I mean, they are brilliant in their transparency. So you will know what Lincoln are up to. You will see their financial data. You will see what they are doing in terms of equality standards. You will see what they're doing in terms of community engagement. It's there, it's front and center. That's a really good example. Or Plymouth Argyle, who have arguably the best set of financial figures and financial accounts that you can see. It's very clearly laid out. It is easily digestible to the layman. That sort of stuff, that level of transparency, that level of openness is kind of where you want football to be. Yes, AFC Wimbledon do well, but then we're a fan-run club, so our entire ethos was built on being transparent and being open and being embedded in the community. That would be to be expected. But there are so many other clubs that are striving up. Brentford do brilliantly on equality standards in the Premier League. So there are elements that are there that you can see, whereas there are other clubs that obviously are completely the other way.
What would you say is the kind of philosophy and approach from Fair Game in trying to create this change for football? Obviously, it's going to be a bit of a mammoth task in terms of the way football is currently set up and is running at the moment. What is your approach to creating that positive change?
I think it goes back to this reward element. To change the culture that has been embedded for so long, you need to change the way a financial director, a managing director, a CEO, an owner of a football club looks at football. And remember that most of them are business people, so they're looking at how do I make this club thrive. Most of them actually don't want to lose, throw money at it. They don't want to be an owner benefactor. They actually want to be, seeing how it can thrive. There are some philanthropists naturally, but it's about that culture change. So the key philosophy is to look at creating a game that has an ecosystem that rewards well-run clubs, that sees financial sustainability to seeing as really important, seeing community engagement as being a fundamental, long-term, important element to football. Football used to be built around the communities it serves and operates in. That actually secures a football club for the long term. An owner can come and go, but if the club is embedded within its community, that club will exist and thrive. That's the culture we need to move towards, the kind of custodian approach to football rather than the plaything. So a football club's a gambling chip.
Yeah. So given if you were kind of successful in implementing these changes that you'd like to see? What ultimately is what will football look like in 5 years' time, based on kind of the things that you'd like to see change?
I think you would be looking at a game where success on the pitch will be built upon the talent of the coach. So, it wouldn't be how much money are we paying this particular player, because that would be dependent on how successful, how big the club is, what the revenues of the club are about. Yeah. So the actual turning point would be, is this coach actually any good? Can he get the best out of these players? Is he selecting the best players? So it becomes much more of a level playing field. It becomes a game where the experience of the fan is second to none. Mm-hmm. So people want to come to the game, want to come to the stadium, almost irrespective of what's happening on the pitch. They feel a kind of sense of belonging, that club represents what that community is about. The club is a beacon for community activity throughout the week. It operates 24/7. It's where people go. It's a destination point. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where you want it to be, so that it's not necessarily about how much the players earn on the pitch. It's about that performance of the coach, and of that level of community engagement that isn't necessarily there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've often heard, Premier League football certainly compared to kind of an arms race, a financial arms race in that respect as well. So it'd be, I suppose a disarmament in that sense would be quite a...
Yeah, I mean, it's that as well. It's like a lot of football fans will feel like they are a customer, or they're just £50 on a seat. That's what they are. They're never Joanna Smith. That's who they never are. Joanna Smith, the the football stadium designer, the accountant, the kind of care worker, the kind of person. They're not an individual who can offer and give something to that community and that club. That's where football needs to be looking at its supporters as being an asset, being part of them, being an actual embedded within their culture. And they are individuals who can offer something, rather than people to take cash, because that disconnect is very much there. You have at the Premier League level, almost as though your attendees at a game are cinema goers.
Yeah. Okay. So if there was an individual that was watching or listening to this, and they buy into that, they share that vision for football, they want to see it more community based, they want to see it more around the community orientation of those clubs that they've sort of grown up supporting, how would they go about getting involved in Fair Game? How can an individual get involved as opposed to a club?
So I mean, that's very difficult. Very easy. Very, very easy. You have to edit that out. Very easy. So literally, it is just dropping an email through to either myself, and we've got a good volunteer team of people, and that's how we can look at getting you involved in a whole range of things. So that's from project management, research management, social media, fundraising, advocacy. There's a whole load of different streams of work that we're really keen to do, and we're all about constant improvement. So anybody can come in with that, and we want to look at using their skill set. That's how you can do on a kind of more in-depth level. On a more easy level, then it is literally looking at contacting your local politicians and saying, look, Fair Game is the way forward. This is the way you need to do. Look at our website and encourage them when it comes to the regulation, and there will be a vote, that they push for financial flow to be included in the independent regulator's remit, to make sure that we have that ability to reward well-run clubs. That's the key. That's the one bit that we really need to do. It needs to be every political force and pressure put on to ensure that happens, because if that does happen, if that remit of financial flow is included, then we have that real strong opportunity to deliver culture change. And remember, that was the regulation bit that our research proved. With that ability to incentivize, then we will see culture change. That's the key. And I think that's where people can really make a difference.
Great. And I suppose the last couple of questions for you now, what would you consider to be some of the greatest successes of the Fair Game movement so far?
Well, I mean, I can talk about I'll be so, you know, the fan-led review, when the fan-led review came out, we published our manifesto 2 months before. And in the fan-led review, there are several paragraphs that are direct lifts, I mean, word for word. So that's quite a nice compliment.
Yeah.
I'd say 80% of what was in the fan-led review was reflected from our manifesto. I'm not saying that there was, you know, that kind of connection, but there is an element of it. We've also seen the DCMS engaging with them quite a lot about what we wanted to do. That's really positive. We're seeing really good political movement from notably the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party in terms of aligning themselves with our positions. Again, that's financial flow, and some good noises from some of the Tories as well. So there's a lot of political success that's been there. Obviously, the growth of Fair Game. We started from nothing, and we have 34 clubs. We want to have more. We want to grow more, and we're seeing interest from other countries as well, and how we take that model of incentivizing and changing the culture of football to different places, and that's really exciting. You know, where we want to go, we'd like to be more professional. We certainly need more funding and all that sort of stuff to become ourselves financially sustainable, and to be able to make sure that we can really push on to another level, because we believe that football can really be that force for good. And if we can create that ecosystem of a fairer future for football, then I think with the academics, with the clubs, we could really create something brilliant.
And final question, you mentioned there about expanding into other countries. Obviously, a lot of the talk that we've had today has been around football in England. There's now Fair Game Scotland, and I want to just ask you about what you see are the challenges in Scotland, how they differ from England, and what your vision for Fair Game Scotland will kind of seek to address north of the border.
So I think the difference is the funding levels. So the amount of money in England compared to the amount of money in Scotland is vastly different. The issues with Scotland is around representation at SPFL level and SFA. So looking at how do you make sure that the pyramid has that full representation. I think there is also a huge fear about relegation from the SFL, the Scottish League, to the Lowland League and the Highland League, and we need to kind of eradicate that and make it feel that it's not a trapdoor that needs to be closed, because at the moment there's that element of going on. Then the whole issue of B teams, you know, that's kind of throws a kind of it's two fingers up to the pyramid in Scotland, and I think we need to look at how we address that. Equally, there you be difficult not to address the elephant in the room, which is the complete dominance in Scotland of Celtic and Rangers, and seeing how much does Celtic and Rangers have a responsibility to honour the rest of the pyramid, and to make sure that the Scottish ecosystem works and operates in a way that actually can make the whole game thrive north of the border. And I think that's possible, and I think that is something to achieve. And equally, what we need to look to do is bring together as many of those other clubs as possible, so they can stand together as a united force and actually push for change, and feel brave enough to put themselves above the parapet, and to see that there is an alternative vision of how Scottish football can operate. And that's what we're developing, that's what we're trying to push for. You know, it'd be great to be in a situation in a few years' time where you had a Scottish FA that was run by, you know, was headed by somebody who maybe was a representative of the Lowland League or a Highland League. You know, that was the person, that's where their background had come from, to have that proper holistic view of how Scottish football operates. So when I went to see Tranent, and you know, there was probably 400 or 500 at Tranent versus Bowness, you know, and you felt that at that moment in time, loads of people were coming through to watch Tranent, you know, and it's that sort of element. And you can see that the potential of a club like that to offer something for that whole community is immense. And that exists across the whole of Scotland. You know, there are so many small clubs that are right at the heart of these communities. You know, the amount of fans that go to football, I believe that the ratio of population to regular football goers is, I think Scotland's the highest. You know, so we need to really respect that, and we need to kind of say, well, actually, look, this is fantastic. Let's really use this and make Scotland an exemplar. You know, England, yes, it's going down a particular path with the current regulator, but with Scotland, I actually believe they can move faster and quicker and be a far better example for football globally than where we are with what we're trying to do with England. Because I think you could do it without an independent regulator north of the border, because I think there's an ability to deliver change there without having to go down that route.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. Thank you very much for your time, Niall. I really appreciate you giving up your time.
Worries.
Talk to us about fair game and what the future of football might look like. And honestly, wish you all the very best with it as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much.